The great question. Imagine waking up one morning to find that everything in your life is exactly the same room, same bed, same quiet hum of the world outside, but one thing is missing: your memory of who you are, your name, your history. Your ambitions all gone. You stand in front of the mirror, not as the person you've always known, but as a stranger. There's a face staring back at you that you're told is yours, but it carries no weight, no recognition, no meaning. And here's the unsettling part. Nothing in the physical world has changed, yet the meaning of everything has evaporated. Your favorite song is now just a collection of sounds. The people who say they love you are just people. The city you live in feels like an alien place. Without the story you've been carrying, without the invisible web of meaning you've been weaving your whole life, you are, at least for a moment, free. But are you free from something, or free for something? Now the question presses in. If identity, memory, and meaning can vanish so easily, what have you really been holding onto all these years? Was it ever real? Or have you been living inside a carefully maintained fiction when you never dared to challenge because it felt too familiar, too safe? We like to believe our lives are built on solid ground, our values, our ambitions, our relationships. But what if these aren't the foundations, but the decorations? What if the true foundation of your life is something you've never even looked at directly, something older, more primal, more inescapable than any belief you've consciously chosen? And here's where the paradox appears. Like a shadow you can't quite catch, you cannot step outside your own mind to examine the lens through which you see the world. You can only look through it, never at it, which means you can spend your whole life believing you're choosing freely, when in reality, the choices have been framed for you since the beginning. The ancient philosophers understood this. They knew that the most dangerous prison is not made of stone walls, but of invisible assumptions. You do not try to escape what you cannot see. You do not question what you believe is just the way things are. But then what is the great question? It is not simply, who am I? That is the beginner's riddle. The deeper, sharper, more dangerous question is this: what is the origin of the self that is asking, who am I? Because if you trace the thread far enough back, you begin to suspect that the you who claims ownership of your life may not be the author at all. You may be an actor in a play whose script was written long before you took the stage, by biology, by culture, by history, by the deep evolutionary imperatives coded into your blood. And yet, there's a whisper you can't quite silence. A whisper that says, if this script was written for me, perhaps it can be rewritten by me. This is where the unease becomes unbearable, because it's one thing to live unknowingly inside a narrative, and another to realize you might have the power to change it. But change comes at a price. You must first be willing to dismantle the version of yourself you've always protected. You must watch it dissolve, knowing you can never return to the old certainty. So we arrive at a crossroads, not in the outer world, but in the deep interior of the mind. Do you choose the comfort of the familiar, even if it's an illusion, or do you step into the unknown, armed only with the faint hope that truth, whatever it is, will be worth the cost? An ancient lesson hides here, one whispered through the words of mystics, philosophers, and wanderers for thousands of years, that the self you cling to is not the self you must keep. That transformation is not an addition to who you are, but a stripping away of everything you thought you had to be. But before we can uncover this lesson, before we can see the path forward, we must first descend. We must look unflinchingly into the roots of this invisible prison, its psychological wiring, its philosophical architecture, its quiet hold on your every decision. And so the question hangs in the air, heavy, waiting to be answered. What if the life you are living is not truly yours? And what would it cost you to make it? So the hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots, the first trap of human existence, is that you believe you are free simply because you feel free. You make choices. You pursue dreams, you fall in love, you change jobs, and all of it feels voluntary. But Carl Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the invisible problem. The unseen puppeteer pulling the strings is not some sinister government or shadowy cabal, it is your own unexamined mind. And worse, the mind that is running your life is not entirely yours. From the moment you were born, you were fed a steady diet of meaning. What's good? What's bad? What's worth pursuing? What's shameful? What makes a person valuable? What makes a person worthless? None of these were chosen by you. They were whispered in your ear by parents, teachers, television, religion, culture, until they stopped sounding like ideas and started sounding like truth. By the time you could even say your own name, the script had already been set. Sartre might call it bad faith, the tendency to live by roles and expectations rather than face the terrifying openness of true freedom. Nietzsche might see it as the herd instinct, the quiet compulsion to move in the same direction as everyone else, not out of reason, but out of a fear of being alone in the wilderness. The human mind, after all, is not built for truth. It is built for survival, and survival depends on belonging to family, to tribe, to the unspoken rules of whatever world you're born into. Our neural wiring rewards conformity with dopamine, and punishes deviation with social pain so acute that it activates the same brain circuits as physical injury. So what do? We build a self that fits the mold. We edit our desires to match what's acceptable. We hide our doubts beneath polite smiles. And soon, the mask doesn't feel like a mask anymore, it feels like a face. Arthur Schopenhauer would say we are driven by the will to live, a blind and restless force that keeps us moving forward without ever asking if the destination is worth reaching. Aldous Huxley might remind us that culture is a form of mass hypnosis. Every man who knows how to read has it in his power to magnify himself, to multiply the ways in which he exists. But it requires discipline to escape the hypnotic influence of words. The hidden problem, then, is not merely that you have been shaped, it's that you've mistaken the shape for your essence. You do not recognize the difference between the raw clay of your being and the sculpture your world has carved from it. Psychologically, this runs deep. Cognitive biases, confirmation bias, status quo bias, anchoring make sure we cling to what we already believe, not because it's true, but because it's safe. The brain resists change not as a matter of stubbornness, but as a matter of survival. Economics, rewiring costs energy, and energy is scarce. This is why even people who know they're living a false life often can't change it. The false life is stable, predictable, comfortable. It offers the soothing lullaby of familiarity. The unknown, on the other hand, offers no such comfort, it only offers risk. And yet, if we look closely, we can see the cracks. That restless dissatisfaction that creeps in at night when the world is quiet. The nagging sense that no matter how much you achieve, it never quite fills the hollow space inside. The low hum of anxiety that no amount of distraction seems to silence. These are not flaws in your character. They are symptoms. They are signals from the deeper layers of your being, warning you that the life you are living does not fully match the truth of who you are. The ancient Stoics knew this, which is why they spoke so often about distinguishing between what is within your control and what is not. Viktor Frankl, writing after surviving the concentration camps, took it further. The last human freedom, he said, is the power to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. But to choose consciously, you must first see clearly, and most of us never do. Here lies the philosophical wound. You are not simply a product of your choices. You are a product of the forces that shaped the chooser. Until you see those forces, you are living inside their logic. You think you're playing the game, but the game is playing you. This is why the ancient lesson is so hard to accept. It asks you to confront the fact that the self you defend, the life you are building, may be nothing more than the byproduct of ancient survival instincts and inherited cultural scripts. To accept this is to accept that your life, as it currently stands, may be built on borrowed dreams. And yet, here's the cruelest twist. Most people, even when they glimpse this truth, turn away from it. They feel the crack in the facade and quickly plaster over it with busyness, ambition, entertainment, anything to avoid the abyss. Because once you see the problem clearly, you can't unsee it. And if you see it, you must decide, will you keep living as before, now knowing it's a performance, or will you tear down the set and face the raw, uncertain stage beneath? The answer to that question determines whether you remain a prisoner or whether you begin to walk free. But before freedom, you must first see the cost of your captivity. The unseen consequences. You've probably felt it before, this quiet, almost imperceptible tension that runs through daily life. You're at a party, smiling, nodding, talking, but there's a strange hollowness under the surface. Or you wake up one morning and, without knowing why, you feel like you're going through the motions of someone else's day. That's the problem showing itself in disguise. When you live from a self that has been constructed by external forces, rather than carved by your own deliberate hand, you begin to suffer in ways that are hard to name. The suffering is not always dramatic. It rarely announces itself with catastrophe. It shows up in subtle patterns, almost too quiet to notice. But over time, these patterns become the architecture of your life. You work in jobs you secretly despise because they align with the expectations of the people you're trying to impress. You form relationships that look good on paper but feel like wearing a suit that doesn't quite fit. You buy things you don't need not because you believe they'll make you happy, but because the culture has taught you that buying is the same thing as becoming. The worst part, you may not even see these as consequences. You see them as just the way life is. Neuroscience explains part of this. The brain's default mode network, the system that governs your sense of self, is wired to reinforce familiar patterns, even harmful ones, because they feel safe. To the brain, familiarity equals survival. This means you can live decades repeating the same loops, never realizing that you're not choosing them, they're choosing you. The philosopher Kierkegaard called this despair, not the loud, desperate kind, but the quiet despair of never becoming your true self. It's the despair of settling for a life that is good enough to keep you from revolting, but not real enough to satisfy the hunger you carry in your soul. And here's where the consequences spread beyond the individual into society itself. A population living from false selves becomes easy to govern, easy to sell to, easy to manipulate. When people are disconnected from their inner compass, they will follow whichever compass is handed to them. The advertising industry knows this. Political strategists know this. Social media algorithms know this. They don't need to control you overtly. They only need to feed your constructed identity, because the more you identify with it, the more predictable you become. This is why the ancient lesson is dangerous to those in power. A person who has seen through the illusion of their borrowed self is difficult to control. They are not swayed by every trend. They don't panic when told to panic. They don't consume to fill a void. They dismantle the void itself. But most people never get there. Instead, they live out the unseen consequences in slow motion. Chronic dissatisfaction, a sense that no achievement ever lands the way it's supposed to. Anxiety and restlessness, a mind that constantly looks ahead, hoping the next milestone will finally feel like home. Emotional numbness, the inability to fully feel joy or connection because everything is filtered through a self that isn't authentic. Fragmented relationships, bonds formed between masks rather than between real people. And then there's the ultimate cost: time. Time is the one currency you can never replenish, and yet most people spend it serving the priorities of a life that isn't truly theirs. Psychology has a term for this kind of slow erosion: learned helplessness. When you've been living under certain conditions long enough, you stop trying to change them. Even when the door to your cage is left open, you convince yourself that the cage is your home. Culturally, this is why whole societies can drift into decay without open revolt. It's why comfort can be more dangerous than hardship, because hardship forces you to act, while comfort lulls you into forgetting you had a choice to begin with. If you were to step back and look at the human condition from a distance, you'd see billions of lives unfolding inside this invisible architecture. You'd see dreams deferred, creativity smothered, authentic voices silenced before they could speak. You'd see a world where people mistake conformity for peace, distraction for joy, and routine for purpose. And yet, some people wake up. Sometimes it's triggered by loss, sometimes by crisis, sometimes by a moment of unbearable honesty with oneself. They catch a glimpse of the truth that the life they've been living is only one of many possible lives, and that the self they've been defending is only one of many possible selves. Once that realization hits, the consequences flip. The very structure that once kept you safe becomes unbearable. The job, the relationship, the city, the habits, all the things that once felt like life itself now feel like bars on a cell. And here's the most important part. Once you reach this stage, there is no going back. You can pretend you don't see the bars, but the pretending will poison you faster than the truth ever could. Which brings us to the turning point: the rebellion. The moment when you stop playing by the rules of the script you were handed and begin to write your own. It is not a comfortable process. It is not polite. It is not without loss. But it is the only way to reclaim your life from the unseen forces that have been living it for you. The rebellion is not about rejecting the world, it's about refusing to reject yourself. That is where we go next. The rebellion, how to break free. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the weight of your borrowed life becomes too heavy to carry. It's not a cinematic explosion of defiance. It's more like a whisper that refuses to fade. This isn't me. And that whisper is dangerous. The rebellion begins the moment you stop dismissing it as a phase or a passing mood. It begins when you realize that the cost of staying the same is now greater than the cost of change. But here's the truth they don't tell you. Breaking free is not a single act. It's not one grand gesture that severs the chains. It's a series of choices, each one daring to defy the gravity of your old life. The first choice is the most terrifying because it's not about changing your circumstances. It's about questioning the foundation on which those circumstances rest. You start asking, who decided that this is what success looks like? Who told me this is the kind of person I should love? Who convinced me that my worth depends on what I produce, earn, or own? At first, these questions feel like small cracks in the surface, but they widen quickly. You begin to see that much of what you've called my life is actually a collage of other people's voices, stitched together by years of habit. Nietzsche wrote about this moment as the birth of the free spirit, the one who refuses to be bound by inherited truths and instead dares to create their own. But freedom, as he also warned, is not comfortable. It is cold at first, lonely, stripped of the warm certainty that came from moving with the herd. That's why most people turn back. To break free, you must accept the loneliness of the early stages. You must be willing to exist in the in-between, no longer the person you were, not yet the person you are becoming. This is where the ancient lesson begins to show itself, because every spiritual tradition worth its salt has spoken of this desert period. In mythology, the hero must leave the village. In religion, the seeker must wander the wilderness. In psychology, the self must undergo dissolution before reorganization. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious and becoming whole. Practically, rebellion can look deceptively ordinary. It might mean saying no to a promotion that would impress everyone but deaden your soul. It might mean ending a relationship that is stable but suffocating. It might mean moving to a place where no one knows your name, so you can find out who you are without the weight of old expectations. The common thread is this: rebellion is not about destruction for its own sake. It's about clearing the ground for something real to grow. One of the most radical acts you can commit in a world built on distraction is to be present with yourself. Without a mask, no phone, no noise, just you. At first, this can feel unbearable. The silence presses in, and you feel the raw edges of all the emotions you've been avoiding. But if you stay with it long enough, the fear begins to dissolve, and something else emerges: clarity. This clarity is dangerous to the system that shaped you because it allows you to see where the bars are, and once you see them, you can begin to dismantle them. There's another truth here. The rebellion doesn't happen in isolation. The world is full of others who have heard the same whisper, who have felt the same restlessness. When you begin to live from your own center, you will find them. They may not be the people you expected. They may not look like your old circle at all, but they will be your allies, not because you share the same opinions, but because you share the same commitment to live from the inside out, not the outside in. Historically, every great shift in human thought, whether it was Socrates in Athens, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, or civil rights leaders standing against injustice, began with individuals who refused to live under the assumptions they inherited. Their lives were their rebellion. Your rebellion may not make headlines, but it can remake your world. You don't need to overthrow governments or write manifestos. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is to live a life that is unmistakably yours, without apology. The rebellion is not the end goal, it is the gateway. On the other side is not merely freedom from the old, but freedom for the new. And that new is where the ultimate truth begins to reveal itself. But be warned, the ultimate truth is not a gentle comfort. It is not the fairy tale ending where all is neatly resolved. It is a shift so profound that it rearranges the very meaning of freedom, of self, of life itself. If you dare to keep walking, the path will lead you there. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. If you've made it this far, something irreversible has already begun. You've stepped outside the current of the life you were handed. You've begun to sense the space between who you've been and who you could be. And now we arrive at the threshold, the place where the ancient lesson waits. It is not what most people expect. It is not a secret formula, not a hidden doctrine, not a mystical code to unlock the universe. The ultimate truth is far more unsettling, because it erases the very idea that you ever needed one. Here it is: you were never trapped in the first place. The bars of your prison were not walls of steel, but walls of belief. The self you have been trying to liberate was never fixed, never solid, never even fully real. It was a story, a useful one, perhaps, but still a story. And like all stories, it can be rewritten, reframed, or simply set down. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke of awakening, not the acquisition of new truths, but the dissolution of false ones. The Buddha called it unatono, fixed self. Eckhart, the medieval mystic, called it the birth of the true self, which is nothing like the personality you've been defending. The paradox is that you spent so long fighting for freedom without realizing you were always free to step outside the script. The only thing keeping you in character was your refusal to see that the role was optional. Philosophically, this realization is seismic. If there is no fixed you, then life ceases to be about becoming something and starts being about being. If there is no preordained role, then every moment becomes a blank page. But here's why this truth feels terrifying instead of liberating at first. Without the scaffolding of a fixed identity, there are no more excuses. You can no longer say, "This is just who I am." You can no longer blame the past for the present. Freedom strips away the comfort of inevitability. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But strength here is not control over life, it's the courage to meet life as it is, moment by moment, without the filter of a story you cling to. Imagine standing on the edge of a vast ocean. The old life, the constructed self, is behind you, a shore you can never return to. Ahead is open water. You can swim in any direction, but there are no guarantees, no maps. This is freedom in its rawest form, possibility without certainty. The ancient lesson tells us that the self is a tool, not a master. Use it when needed, let it go when not. Play roles in the world, but never mistake the role for the actor. Live in the story, but never forget you are also the storyteller. This is not an escape from reality, it is the most direct meeting with it. When you stop clutching at a fixed identity, you discover that life is not something happening to you. It is something happening through you. You are not a static thing. Moving through time, you are the ever-changing meeting point of consciousness and experience. And here is where the liberation deepens. If you are not fixed, then neither are your limits. You are not bound by the labels you were given, the failures you've endured, or the patterns you've repeated. The past does not have to be the prologue unless you choose to make it so. But this freedom also carries a demand. It asks you to live deliberately, to choose consciously, to act as the author of your days. You can no longer hide behind the comfort of someday. You must begin now. The final step of the rebellion is not to reject the old self, is to hold it lightly. To see it as one chapter among many, not the entire book. To wake each day and, instead of asking who am I supposed to be, ask, what will I create with this moment? This is why the ancient lesson changes everything. Because it doesn't give you an answer, it gives you the space to live without one. You may notice that the urgency you felt earlier, the pressure to figure it all out, begins to dissolve. You no longer need to find the perfect role, the perfect path, the perfect version of yourself. You realize there is no final version. There is only the dance between what is and what can be. And in that dance you are both the dancer and the dance. When you truly grasp this, the fear of wasting your life fades. You see that life cannot be wasted so long as you are present for it. Every step, every misstep, every twist in the plot becomes part of the story you are living now. So here you are, standing at the edge of your own life with the pen in your hand. The script is yours now. No one will tell you how to write it. No one will guarantee it will be easy, but it will be yours. And perhaps that is the only truth worth chasing. Because when the end comes, and it will, you won't be asking whether you became the person you were told to be. You'll be asking whether you lived fully as the person you chose to be. That is the ancient lesson. That is the real freedom.